Suns fans, you know what time it is in the PHX.
Empire of the Suns.
Phoenix Suns.
Empire of the Suns.
Hello there, and welcome to the Empire of the Suns podcast. My name is Kellen Olson, joined as always by Kevin Zimmerman. What's up?
Howdy, how are you? Holding up.
We're getting there. Having a lot of fun. Draft week is always fun because there's a lot of things happening, and we get to talk about them, and we're going to talk about them today. If you did not listen to our podcast yesterday, I encourage you to listen to it because the majority of our Ryan Dunn analysis is in there. We're going to talk about mainly today how our opinion on the draft class itself is now formed, and we probably feel a little bit differently about the Dunn pick than we did yesterday because it looked like only 56. It's not the case. The Suns, traded up to 40 to draft the Marquette big Oso Ighodaro, and then Kevin, our prayers on the podcast of many years were answered. They got in on the two-way action, the undrafted action. They got Jalen Bridges out of Baylor, who was someone we mentioned yesterday. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago, a trade down target, a guy at 56 yesterday, and they get him on a two-way. We're going to get into a lot. We're going to look at how the Suns did in the draft, and then we're going to preview free agency. How do they do? What do they have left to fill? Who are some targets? All that kind of stuff we're going to get into. Then we're going to look league-wide for both the draft and free agency, things to watch. Let's start with the draft. Now that it's done, now that we have this three-player class in front of us, what do you think?
You like the basketball IQ and the teamwork stuff between these guys. It feels like a James Jones draft. You know, you get some pretty experienced college guys. I guess Ryan Dunn, 2 years at Virginia, but it's a high-profile school. A lot of exposure to playing really good teams, so there's a lot of good tape on him. And when you see enough of that type of player, I think then you don't worry about he hasn't played 5 years, he's not ready. I think he'll be ready. So those three players have really good experience, high-level games. Again, I think that was super important when you talk about making the jump to the NBA. Like an AJ Mitchell, for example, I don't know how Big West experience. They played Baylor once, and that was about it. When you put him next to NBA athletes, how players like that look. So I think from that perspective, it makes sense. There are shooting questions across the board and fit questions, but, I'm not going to hammer the Suns hard on that because they got smart basketball players who work hard, have good character, all that. Around the edges you can work with, and maybe, just maybe, they're going to find really good roles and maybe even improve the shooting. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think there's a good shot you get one or two really good contributors down the road.
Should add, news to come down in the last 30 minutes. Exhibit 10 contracts, I believe, if I remember them correctly, are upgraded summer league contracts is the way that I'll phrase them, where you sort of you hold the rights to a player going into training camp, I want to say, is how this works.
And you can convert them, basically.
And you can convert them into a two-way or convert them to a traditional roster spot even. Boo Buie, who was a big-time problem at Northwestern. I believe he was the school's all-time leading scorer, scoring guard, point guard stuff kind of there. They signed him to an Exhibit 10 contract. We'll include him in the class as well. The point on the James Jones kind of draft, the comparison that I'm making in the story that I'm going to write next week, I want to watch more of Oso Ighodaro and also hear from James Jones and the players. We're going to hear from them next week to kind of share more. But Ighodaro is your classic, like you said, James Jones pick, 4 years of college, two pretty prominently where he was one of the best bigs in the country, and has traits that will be ready right now. And the combination of them makes you believe that he could play effective NBA minutes pretty quickly. Then there's the inverse, which is the Jalen Smith pick, which has always been this outlier where what were they trying to do? They just took a backup center 10th overall. And then we hear Monty Williams say they're trying to turn him into a Pascal Siakam type later on in his career. And I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense for why you guys picked him. But that's not who Jalen Smith is. So you guys were trying actually to get a pretty developmental prospect where at the time, I think what we would say a lot was that Jalen Smith was someone that had NBA skills, didn't look like a guy with a ton of upside, but the Suns felt like there was some untapped upside there. And why I'm bringing this up with Ryan Dunn is because so many people are down on him because of his shooting resume, rightfully so. It's very concerning. But I think the Suns believe that there's something untapped that people don't quite see there. Is it using him as a screener in a small ball 5? I don't know. Is it he can make it work in a high octane offense like the Suns? I don't know. But that's what that pick sort of reminds me of a little bit more. And some of my fault with the Dunn pick was how much of a risk it was, but now I don't see it as much of a risk because you've got two other players that could really pan out for you.
Yeah, and Iguodaro, to kind of give what he looks like as a player, I kind of compare him to a Dario, undersized 5, ball mover, guy who is going to move the ball. In short roll situations, that's really where he's going to be good, because you look at him to catch off the pick and roll, on the move, make good decisions. He isn't like a super, super amazing athlete, and then the size again matters. But when you look at how he scores, I can go pull up the numbers, but a large chunk of his was in the mid-range, but it's like very short mid-range, 2-point stuff. And he's just catching. He has crazy floater game. So if he's not drawing fouls, if he's not just like attacking the rim for dunks, catching lobs, then he has a little something where it's a little more dynamic. He can get, I don't know if you call it big man shake or whatever. So I think though, when you talk about Ryan Dunn, like you explained to me off the air that there's something about him being like a small big. Like he's going to play center and play with a bunch of shooters a lot because he does not have that shot right now. But right now, I think that's fine, and I just don't know if he and Iguodaro go with one another and that sort of thing. Let me pull up the numbers here. Iguodaro shot 62% over a 4-year career. 13 points, 6.9 rebounds, 2.9 assists, a block, a steal, a little over each of those. And then he only shot 62% from the foul stripe. But again, 52% of his shots were classified as 2-point jumpers. 46% of those shots came in like the short mid-range area. So really what you're dealing with is a guy who can score in a pretty unique way. But again, it's like, he and Dunn, I don't know how you play both of them at the same time. I don't know if that's a concern, though, because you just want to hit on one of these guys, and if one of them develops a shot or something else, expands their game a little bit, then it's less of a worry. But plays defense, rebounds, both those guys do it. Will make the right pass, right read, especially Iguodaro when you're playing with the big three. So for me, and I think Gambo tweeted it, like, they were looking at him at 28, and I'm trying to pull up because I'm not logged in, but he was as high as a lottery pick in Sam Vecini's December mock draft, so he obviously fell for whatever reason. Obviously not having a shot, being undersized at center matters, and as low as 67th on another big board, so he was really rangy as far as where people were guessing he would go. The Suns obviously thought he was closer to in the 30s, let's say.
The situation that we were sort of using a lot more was Vecini's mock at the start of the week that had the Suns getting up to 3 total picks, right? And we were looking at that and saying, okay, this increases your odds of the goal here, which is to come out with one rotation player. And I think the interesting thing here is that you and I aren't super high on Dunn as a prospect, to the point where these other 2 prospects, I think we feel, Jalen Bridges and Oso Iguodaro, there's a decent chance that one guy or the 2 of the guys will include 2 of those guys. That's how it works. But point being, I think there's a good chance that 40 or the undrafted guy could wind up being that rotation player than the guy that you picked at 28. And to me, that's a good thing. Like it's a good thing. And Dunn is just a bizarre prospect. We talked about this last night, but one more time, he is raw because his offensive role is unclear. The assists, the playmaking, I watched back 3 more games this morning, watched offensive possessions, and it's what I thought. Like, I don't feel like I was being too harsh on it. Feel like it's there. Again, the Suns believe that the end goal is not even that he's good on offense or average on offense. It's can you get away with having him on the floor? Like, that's it. That's all it's got to be. Can you get away with having his defense out there? Because what I said to Dave Burns on Burns and Gambo today is there are going to be multiple episodes of this podcast you and I do. I was talking about their show, but for us, we're going to be like, okay, Tuesday they beat the Lakers. Man, that Ryan Dunn 6-minute sequence changed the game completely. He had that steal, that block, 2 cuts, that transition. He was everywhere for 6 minutes, and he won them the game. He is going to have games like that, but he needs to be able to stay on the floor and not have his offense be a detriment. Like, a game-changing ability for a rookie is rare, but he's going to have that because of his defense. Like, he's going to shift games a couple of times this year, even if the offense is not good.
Yeah.
He's going to have that still, but the long-term viability is where I was concerned, because guess what? If Ryan Dunn can shoot in 5 years, it doesn't matter that much. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. It still makes this draft pick a success long-term, but if he is a viable rotation player now, that is more valuable than if he is an all-star, but not until year 6.
Yeah.
Like, if he is not contributing that much for the first 4 years, and then they signed like a 1-year deal off his 4-year guarantee, and then that's when everything clicks all of a sudden, that's not as valuable unless that team is still contending in the way that this team is contending. So that risk is now alleviated slightly, because if you come out of this with Iguodala being a player, or if you come out of it with Bridges being a player, and both of those guys, I don't see a veteran's minimum target at center that would absolutely 100% be ahead of Iguodala. Like, it's going to be a competition for those minutes no matter who they sign at center to go along in that rotation. And the same goes for wing. The same goes at wing too.
Yeah, and I think Iguodala, like, we talked about Nurk's on-off, and we can pull that up too. Like, they were just lost without him, and people, like, don't see it. The numbers say it more than the eye test, really, but just the offense flowed. The defense wasn't as bad as you might think because he was in the right spots, even though he might have been picked on, and especially in the playoffs. Iguodala gets rid of, like, I don't think he'd be as picked on because he's a pretty decent enough athlete where I think he's going to translate to being a decent or good defender because he's very smart. There's actually a clip on Twitter, I think, going around where he's just breaking down like a Warriors play, and it's like, there's no reason for you. Like, most college kids are like doing homework or worrying about their own playbook, but he's like, oh, the Warriors, this play, they're running this. Yep, here's that. And he's just explaining it to someone interviewing him, which is kind of just going around right now because he's a smart dude, which is cool to see. But anyway, like, on defense, check. On offense, he can probably do the same things Nurk was doing. Now, we'll see as far as passing and keeping the ball moving, I mean. So that stuff's pretty promising, and that's why I liked him going to the Suns. Like, I wrote in maybe May, just quick look at, okay, here are like 5 center prospects, here are 5 wings, here are 5 point guards. He was on my list because I was like, I just like him. He seems like a smart basketball player. You can't have enough of those. And then they go out and get him and apparently like him enough. So also local kid that he's going to be a fan favorite, I think, for that reason too. But the
only way that he does not have a long and successful career as a backup big is if his defensive versatility is just a step behind. And what I mean by that is either the processing speed isn't quite there, which I don't think it's going to be based on everything we know about his profile. Should add Marquette played, we mentioned it with Kolek, we should mention it with Iguodala. They played a pro-style offense. Like, they ran a lot of stuff and did a lot of stuff that the Suns will do. So if he's not able to process as quickly defensively, or he's just a step slower than we think, and the switchability or the ability to hedge and recover, things like that aren't really there, because that will also impact his offense where, okay, he's a half step slower on the rim runs than we think. He's not quite the finisher over a rim protector or over a rotator that we thought, where you want that lob threat, you want that explosive guy. This is why I wanted a Dembona, because if you trap and he's going downhill, he's a freight train. We saw him have that free throw line, dunk from the free throw line like 15 times.
If people see him
career.
start to flash, they're panicking and running to try to stop him before he even gets, it's a little different.
It's not that type of like just insane rim running, but it's quality and it's there. And most importantly, Bona cannot do this. Someone like Dunn, we talked about the decision making. Iguodala can make that pass and he does it really well. I think that one thing to watch for is the amount of turnovers that he has. The turnovers weren't insane at Marquette, but how many completely avoidable mistakes are you limiting in those passes? Because we're asking you as a rookie right away to be a guy who's moving the ball quite a bit. Can you limit the turnovers? Can you limit the mistakes? Because that is how, when you play 14 minutes a game, if you turn the ball over twice as a center, it's hard for you to make up for that, really, with what he does. I just really like the profile of the kid, and I really like how it just seems like the NBA traits are in his game right now. Little small, 6'11". His wingspan is under 6'11". That is not exactly, with that type of profile physically, you're looking for how he moves around the floor, battles inside with physicality, and how he rebounds. Was a really good offensive rebounder in college, not so much a defensive rebounder, however. So there's some ceiling concerns, but we're talking about 40th in the NBA draft, and you're getting someone who, if I had to bet right now, yes or no, if he's going to have a 7+ year career in the NBA playing successful minutes, I would bet yes right now.
Yeah.
And you took him 40th.
Yeah. And I think just a real quick note on his profile, he's like, if he can be like a Jared Dudley, where he's not even a terrible athlete, I don't think, but if he can be like, I can hang against most fours, I can switch on threes and survive, or switch on twos even and survive, that's going to be a lot more valuable than if he's like, oh, he's too slow, doesn't have processing to make up for it, and he's an undersized center, like weight-wise, where he can't even defend centers. So I think he's going to be undersized, but if he's smart and he can switch, that's just going to give you something very different than Nurk and complement it. And then also, again, you're not losing as much ball movement on offense and not knowing where you're going to be on defense.
If you have any draft-related questions and you're in the live stream right now, head on over to that little comment section on the side of your screen, the bottom of your screen. If you're on your phone, I don't know where it is on your phone. You're staring at it on your phone right now. It's like a calendar. It's right here. It's like, I know, but I haven't been on live stream on my phone, but I don't know where it is. Go in there, ask questions. Jeremy will relay them to us, and we'll answer a few of them on the draft, free agency, whatever you want us to sort of address. We will get sort of inside there. Can I help you out with Boo Booey here really quickly?
Yeah, that's actually a question. I'm looking at the feed right now.
Okay. Boo Booey. Remember the way we talked about Jamal Shed?
Yeah.
Let's go down a tier. Remember the way we talked about Tristan Newton?
Yeah.
Let's go down a tier. That's Boo Booey. So the similar kind of moxie, leader, intangibles, point guard, high-scoring guy. Over his last 3 years at Northwestern, he just became one of the signature players of that conference, which is the best college basketball conference in the world until this year, of course, because we moved to the Big 12 and made it better. 19 points per game, 44% from the field, 43% from three this year on 6 attempts per game, which sounds super fun until you see the 32, 34, 36 from his previous 3 seasons. He was a 5-year player at Northwestern. The career number, 35% from three over 5 attempts per game. I'm guessing a whole lot of that was coming off of the dribble for him. So that's something that I'm going to look up on Hoop Math right now and see. I love the free throw stuff as well, because he's not a big guy. Again, like Newton, like Shed, he's a lot smaller, but he took over 4 free throws a game each of the last 2 seasons, 87% and 86%. 5 assists per game, too. You look at a scoring guard of his caliber, it looked, the assist stuff at least, is point guard numbers to me. When I watched him, I got more scoring guard vibes when I had the occasional Northwestern game on. But I want to mention him here because he is a legitimately talented college basketball player, and he's going to be playing on their summer league team, and he has a way to squeak in. They have 2 open two-way spots right now as it is, and at the very least is going to be a guy where he'll light it up for the Valley Suns if you add him to that roster, and is the guy where if you have a couple of injuries at guard, you call him up and you have a capable offensive player to bring on and use that spot. It's a different way of thinking about it. Maybe not a long-term development thing, but it's more of a capable body to have around.
If you want to know anything about him, when you bring up like moxie and just like having that leader point guard stuff at a program, like obviously he was at Northwestern for his entire career, I believe. But go search like Chris Collins, like when their last game, I believe, or maybe they won a tournament game or lost or something. But last time he walked off the floor, like Chris Collins and him just like hugged, and like to that coach who's been there a while, like he means a ton to that program. I think Chris Collins called him a goat or something. But just to kind of paint the picture of leader.
It was an emotional farewell for him when he left. I remember this.
It was a big deal. Like, college basketball fans know that about him. So he fits in that mold.
One of the best, we reference these hoop math numbers all the time, the play-by-play data. 54% of his threes were assisted, and he shot 44%. That's one of the best.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Numbers I've seen. Nearly half of them being unassisted, and he's still shooting it that well. So again, this was the outlier year for him. So treat him like a guy more in the mid to high 30s, but can absolutely score. 51% efficiency at the rim. That's pretty low. But again, we're talking about a guy on an Exhibit 10. There's definitely some stuff sort of really there. Do you have anything else on the draft for Phoenix before we get to how it affects them in free agency?
Yeah, just from the chat, also Jalen Bridges, I think I watched enough tape on him to get a sense like he's, again, a guy who was at Baylor a bit, became a really good three-point shooter and had some weird, like he was great his freshman year, bad for 2 years, under 33%. And then senior year, he's back to above 40 at a pretty high volume, but like just solid in the right spots, not crazy numbers, but will do a little scoring, low rebounding. To me, if I'm making a lazy comp, it's Cam Johnson. He's smaller than that, I think. But just a trustworthy guy. You could call him the 3-and-D guy, reliable. And again, program that plays important college basketball games over multiple years. He's been there, been through it.
Before we get to free agency, the one thing I want to add is, theoretically, if Iguodaro and Dunn are both playing, this leaves you with two guys who don't shoot.
Yeah.
And I wonder viability of the second unit when you have two of those guys. So expect them to be staggered if they're both going to play right away. Expect to just primarily see one of them for now and maybe both. And I lean towards Dunn just because of the instant defense that he brings. But the thing is, if you're playing Dunn out there with the second unit, now you need a stretch big because you don't. This is where it gets into, like, is Dunn a backup five now? It gets really hard to figure out his role exactly. So is he more of a long-term project where maybe he's not playing right away, despite the fact that his defense ranks highly than any skill that Deron Holmes, Terrence Shannon, Tristan Da Silva, Yves Missy, Khalil Ware, anyone who went outside the lottery, he has the best individual skill of anyone. The one attribute he has ranks above anything that anyone else does. Like Cam Spencer is a shooter you want to toss in there maybe for fun, like Shireman is a shooter, I guess, but he's incredible as a defender. I cannot exaggerate it enough, but how are you going to fill him into that rotation? I don't know. We got a couple of questions already from the chat that are going into free agency, so we'll get there. Right now, Champs04 asked, how does this change free agency? Where do you think they go from here? I think that what it does automatically is puts less weight on you hitting two positions. So now if you don't come away in free agency with one of your preferred wing targets, it's okay, because first of all, assuming Royce O'Neal is back, one of those two guys is coming off the bench already as it is. You just need one more wing. You've also got Nas Little still for now. If you haven't read the piece yet, I encourage you to go see it, because we had a blip in November where we were like, Nas Little looks like a guy, and then he got hurt, and then he lost his role, and then when he kind of got back in there, the team was different by then, and he sort of lost everything in general. So on the wing is where I'll mention that I don't expect them to be really prioritizing a wing, especially with Bridges as well to consider. I do expect them to go after a backup center, but if they come away with one of the more low-tier veterans as opposed to some of the more desirable targets like Batadze or Drummond or whoever, but the key differentiator for the targets that'll take the minimum at center, Kevin, is that I don't think you're going to get a guy that is highly versatile defensively in the way Iguodaro is. I don't think you're going to get a guy who is a extreme lob threat like the way a Dembona was, and I don't think you're going to get a guy who can really stretch the floor efficiently like Deron Holmes. So that specific skill set that you're looking for, you're not going to find that there. You're just looking for more for reliable minutes. If you're not so sure on Iguodaro, you want to bring in a veteran. So that's where my thought process would change. But ultimately, now all of the attention turns to what I assume you're going to be writing about tomorrow, which is how do the Suns now get their point guard? Because sorry to put the work.
I don't work tomorrow.
You don't work tomorrow. You're not here tomorrow. So someone has to write point guard words tomorrow. Someone's got to do it. Sounds like it's going to be me if anyone's going to do it. Oh boy. Jeff Christopher asked, when will they add a real point guard? Now, real point guard, you're defining there because I'm not saying that name because I don't think I can say that word. The floor general, and if there is a competent one available in free agency.
Do we roll down the list?
Competent. Now, this is where you, the listener, can decide if you feel like this guy is competent. I'm not going to tell you how to think on that. I'll share my input, of course, but what's the list looking like, bud?
All right, let's start here. Kyle Lowry, 38, pretty old. He was playing in 23, 25, I think, minute per game range. Last year, Bartelstein client, notably. 8 points, 3 boards, 4 assists. Notably also, he shoots like around 40% from 3. If you only need, and we talked about this in the Kolek discussion before the draft, if you only need 15, 20 minutes from a point guard, he has clout in the league. He's been there. He's done that in deep playoff runs. He's there. I would think he's only a minimum guy. Jose Alvarado, I don't think he's going to be a minimum guy. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Pat Bev?
Him as a minimum guy?
Yeah.
No.
Pat Bev?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think this is where I say we, like everyone watching and listening, and you and I and Jeremy, everyone, the basketball fans, are going to have to figure out our adjustment here to the second apron, first apron stuff, because to me, he's at least a taxpayer mid-level exception guy still. Like, he's still getting that. And then there is the biannual. Is that the other one? Mm-hmm. 3 or 4 mil, 5 mil. It's like more than the veterans minimum. I think he still gets that. I think Pat Bev still has a rep enough around the league to get that. And I think that's still Kyle Lowry territory too. Like, if I were to sit here and say, will one of those two guys sign for the veterans minimum? I don't think so.
Chris Dunn is the very popular name.
We had another person in the chat ask about Chris Dunn. That was Melvin Powell. He asked about getting a knockdown three-point shooter. Not knockdown shooter, three-point shooter, but an improved three-point shooter. Chris Dunn, you can go back and listen to podcasts about that draft. I don't know if we were on podcasting by then, but I was a noted Chris Dunn head. I was a Chris Dunn stan. Didn't pan out, comes back, looks like an NBA player on Utah. The defense is the thing with him, and the playmaking is the thing with him. Gambo reported on the air that he can't be someone that the Suns are going to be able to get because the Jazz are going to bring him back. And by bring him back, he means they're going to pay him more than the minimum, and that would rule out the Suns.
Who else? Sorry. Cameron Payne. Little legal trouble in Scottsdale. It doesn't seem that big a deal, but
Brief.
he lied about. It's brief. Thoughts on that? I think he's a minimum guy at this point.
Oh, I thought you said like thoughts about the
no,
arrest.
I don't know. I don't have many thoughts.
No, I don't. I
don't get in trouble.
I don't either. Yeah, it's it happens. Yeah, I think so, but
I don't know.
The volatility of his play goes. You remember the really, really good a lot more as the time goes by without the. Like it was a mix. It was a range of things. I think he was steady in a lot of aspects, but there were some tough stretches for him. And
he came back down to earth after the finals run. Yeah,
you do need steady play from him, but at the same time, the game changer, the change of pace guard, that is Cam to a T. I would put him atop or nearly atop the list of targets from the limited supply of guys who I believe would take the minimum. And Cam was effective for the Sixers and showed it in the playoffs too, so maybe he played his way into more than the minimum. I don't know. He's definitely he's staying in the league again. Like, he was looking at a moment where he bounced around a little bit after the Phoenix got rid of him, but I'm glad that he's going to be able to stick around for a bit longer, for sure.
Aaron Holiday return.
That's just not enough point guard stuff. I like Aaron Holiday, but
yeah,
not enough point guard stuff. We need point guard stuff.
Markelle Fultz, where's he at?
He is getting more than the minimum.
Yeah.
But I love Markelle Fultz. Markelle Fultz would be perfect. Can I run you by a different list?
Yeah.
What I did is I went to a salary database, sorted point guards by salary to see, is there now a trade there that we weren't seeing before? Yeah. Now that we know, okay, if you just trade this guy or this pick for a point guard, does it suddenly not hurt you? Does it suddenly put you in a better position than you would have thought originally, now that you know what the roster looks like? Here are the guys who make slightly less money than Jusuf Nurkic, where they're in range of his contract. Colin Sexton, Josh Hart is here listed as a guard. I don't know why. Malik Monk just signed. Bogdanovich.
Not enough point guard.
Your starting center you're trading again.
Yeah.
Kevin Huerter. Karis LeVert, Lou Dort, and we're done already, just like that. Now, if I go down to Nas Little, who makes, Nurk makes 18.1, so let's eliminate Colin Sexton. See, that's the difference. It's $500,000 is the difference, and all of a sudden you can't have this guy anymore. It's ridiculous. No Colin Sexton. D'Lo, by the way, just makes $500,000 more. That would have been a potentially interesting name to discuss. It is not anymore. Nas Little next year makes $6.75 million. Here, the guys that make just a little bit less than that. Peyton Pritchard, but Boston's not moving him. Shaden Sharp, Portland ain't doing that. Javon Carter.
Can't dribble. Do point guard stuff.
Davion Mitchell got traded today to Toronto. John Contrar's here. Dyson Daniels. Would you give up like a protected 2031 pick for Dyson Daniels?
You're going to have to give up like 3 second-round picks at minimum for that guy.
And Cason Wallace isn't going anywhere. Those are the salaries right there. So
okay.
Well, again, we're talking about 1-for-1 stuff. There is some 3-team, 4-team stuff that could get implemented. That could open up some avenues that aren't
free agent?
Really there. He sure is, pal. I was on the air with Burns and Gamble yesterday, and because I thought it was a funny tease for a segment, but also because it's true. Matt Tellem is sort of the X factor of their team. This is the Brooklyn Nets front office member who they brought in. Bobby Marks has called him the creative, sort of intuitive guy that is going to, I guarantee this guy has already, and it didn't happen on draft day, but had dozens of 3 or 4 team scenarios in front of him and that he presented to the Suns front office and their key decision makers. They weren't able to figure out any of those avenues during this draft. They still could. The odds are lower now that the draft is done, but we're not ruling out a trade at this time. But the point being, draft was the biggest night for them, the biggest 2 nights for them. And because the veterans minimum signings are so unappealing, this was really the time for you to upgrade your roster, this or the trade. And I think they did it. I think if you were expecting a lot more, I know a lot of people listening want to see a point guard come in, but it was either the draft where you were going to get that point guard or you weren't. There wasn't a fit on the trade market, and there's just not a fit in free agency. Unless Kyle Lowry is going to take the minimum, or I guess Pat Bev is going to take the minimum, sure, sign me up. But I don't think those guys are taking the minimum. And maybe I'm wrong. You know, Eric Gordon is someone who I would have said is not going to take the minimum, and he took the minimum. So we'll see.
Quick question: was Jamal Shed on the board at 40? Did he go like 45?
Yes.
Would the Suns be in a better spot right now if they have drafted him instead of Oso?
Here's what I'll say. There's a list of a dozen guys I'm looking at for the next 3 years. It's long. So 22, the spot you're at, Deron Holmes goes. Mm-hmm. That is the trade that is made. Mitch Vareldis' Denver Nuggets move up because they were scared Deron Holmes was going to get taken by, I think, the Wizards is what their GM alluded to, or the Timberwolves, excuse me. The example I brought up on the show today is that the NBA draft is, especially in the back half of the first round, has that like roller coaster ride where it's like Jaden McDaniels, Malachi Flynn, Desmond Bane, and it's usually pick by pick.
Yeah.
Terrence Shannon Jr. and Ryan Dunn feels like one, and not in the way where I'm alluding that it's done for sure, but I feel like one of those 2 guys for sure is going to be an effective NBA wing for a long time, and I don't know which one it's going to be. And I think the next 2 guys apply too. Isaiah Collier was the point guard we talked a lot about. We won't go in depth. That was your point guard, but more of a project, a traditional project. Dunn's a unique one, unconventional one. Collier, conventional. Freshman. Needs to do this, needs to do that, needs to grow this skill, needs to grow that awareness, yada, yada. Baylor Shireman, we didn't bring up because we thought he was kind of in that next tier of Ryan Dunn as a prospect, where if they were picking 28th instead of 22nd, I think we would have brought him up a little bit more. Does a lot of offense stuff. Maybe it's because he looks like him and he is left-handed too, but there's like a little Joe Ingles-y stuff where Joe Ingles is like a certified point guard with how he play makes. It's not that deep, don't get me wrong, but not just a shooter, does some crafty lefty stuff off the bounce. I think that's it for me in the next couple of guys. Like, are you going to sit here and say they will rue the day that, speaking of people who had a weird day today, Kyle Filipowski or Tyler Kolek or Johnny Furphy Juan Nunez, Bobby Klintman we brought up, AJ Mitchell. Any of those names you want to bring up before we get to the 40s? Where you want to include them in this list of like, we are going to be watching you. Do you want to include Kolek? I guess if we're sitting here talking about point guard in November and Kolek's immediately good for the Knicks in 14 minutes a game, we'll include him. Furphy in Indiana is a really good fit for him with what they do, how fast they play, and what he will be asked to do. If you picture him in the Neesmith role, for example, but off the bench, I think that's a pretty good spot. Obviously, the Nunez thing, Spurs, I mean, that's the easiest thing to outline there. So is the Thunder getting another skilled ball handler.
Greg Popovich running through the hall meme. Yeah.
I love how the Thunder, it's like, how are the Thunder doing this? It's like, well, they just keep taking skilled ball handlers. They took 3 more in this draft. Like, just look at what they're doing. They're taking guys who can handle the ball.
Some more news. Another Exhibit 10 deal apparently is Tyrese Samuel from Florida. Spent time at Seton Hall. Was like 14 points, 7.4 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, a steal. He does not stretch, but he is a ball mover. And if you go look at some tape, which I did because he's had a workout with the Suns, he kind of has some stuff, but it's from the post. So it's like, we're never going to post you up, Tyrese Samuel, no offense. That's just not what happens in the NBA to Exhibit 10 type talent. But he has some like good passing awareness. So kind of a fun player.
Here is what I'll give you. When we write about the Suns' 2026 pick, they're not going to have this pick in 2026. The 2026 second round pick from Denver, and we're writing the post of like, here are all the steals you got in the second round and why. Like the thing we did with the late first this year, I am going to call right now that there are going to be 3 in the 40s from this class, and you tell me who you think the 3 will be. We've got Oso Ighodaro going 40th to the Suns. Adem Bona goes a pick later to the 76ers. KJ Simpson passed the Aaron Holiday test for you? He did for me.
I just don't know if his size.
I see the NBA player.
Yeah.
I wouldn't bet on him, but I see the NBA player. He goes to Charlotte.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Poor guy.
Jurisic, I'm not sure how to say it. The mega basket player. I wish Damon was here right now. Nikola Jurisic, he goes to Atlanta. That's not great. Heat culture. Welcome aboard, Pal Larson, your boy. There he goes.
There's our Cats talk.
Jamal Shed goes to the Raptors. I guess the Raptors are an underrated organization, but they're just going through a rebuild. There's a lot of Manuel Quickly, RJ Barrett stuff they got to figure out. Are they going to...
He might end up, if they're bad, I think he will play, and they're going to be like, this is our only good thing happening this year.
I would have to have their roster in front of me, but I will go as crazy as to say right now there's a non-zero chance he's one of their 5 best players next year. I'm thinking about their roster. He's not going to be better than Emmanuel Quickly or RJ Barrett or Scotty Barnes. That's 3 guys right there. But who is the 4th and 5th and 6th guy? Grady Dick?
I'm trying to think.
Jakob Poeltl is there still.
Yeah. 5'6". He should be in the rotation.
He's got Christian Coloco upside in the same rotation where he could be playing rotation for them. Right. That still makes me mad. Cam Christie goes to the Clippers. Sort
Possibly.
of a hidden raw wing where he kind of just toiled away in a weird Minnesota spot, didn't flash a ton. So,
or they might Brandon Boston him. And
I think if Cam Christie was playing for, I'm trying to think of like the right, like Texas. If he was playing for Texas and he was playing on a really good team and was in a better situation, he would have been a first round pick.
Yeah.
I think there was some like, your tools are a lot similar to a lot of the guys that went in the 20s and you're here at 46 for some reason. Antonio Reeves out of Kentucky. He goes to the Pelicans at 47. Harrison Ingram out of North Carolina. We brought up that's a Stanford transfer, so Aaron Holiday test for sure for me. He passed. Spurs. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah.
Pacers. Can Tristan Newton figure out how to get a role behind TJ McConnell, Andrew Nembhard, and Tyrese Halliburton? I don't know. And the Pacers also take Enrique Freeman out of Akron, who is someone that I think Damon was a fan of and that a lot of draft people like. So give me your 3. Because there's going to be 3. I'm calling it right now. Your 3 best bets in that range. You want me to go first?
Yeah, just go. I have to look.
I ain't betting against Jamal Shed. I don't care where he goes. I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
He's on my list. Give me Oso Ighodaro off the board. I think that the pathway to success for his situation, what he's going to be asked to do, the system, the amount of... If you put Oso Ighodaro on Charlotte and you asked him to run dribble handoffs with Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, I would feel a lot more worried about it. I think those are 2 really promising young players, to be clear, but it's like the veteran know-how, the savvy that he has to be around to maximize what he does. Oh, Is it crazy that I kind of want to say Bona here?
No.
Because I don't know what the Sixers team is, but he's just kind of I'm going Ingram.
Okay.
I'll go Ingram Spurs. I'll bet on Spurs stuff.
Oh. I think I'm going to go Shed. I'm going to go Ingram. And Bona, probably. And Oso is 4th.
Cool. Before we get to free agency beyond the Suns, because we're briefly going to tell you, keep an eye on these teams, West pecking order stuff, that usual stuff. Any teams' drafts that you loved? I'll start. Utah did super well. Cody Williams at 10. I think he's going to be good. I love the Collier value at 29. Don't know if he's going to be good, but I love the value there. And then they also got Filipowski at 32. I think it was Brennan Clean from Locked On Suns who tweeted this. I'm not as high on guys like Filipowski. Just guys like Filipowski, I guess the only one I'm not high on out of that group. But he said he believed those are 3 guys with lottery-level talent that they got in the draft, and they picked all over the place. Anyone else stick out to you?
Minnesota, just because they have a pretty simple offseason where it's just add guys to your rotation who can complement things. Who was it? Dillingham?
They trade up.
And Shannon.
And this is something we should have mentioned yesterday that we'll mention today. We didn't really get into it. Both of us were like, I don't know what you can get for the 2031 unprotected pick. I don't know. And the Minnesota Timberwolves showed us, which is that they could get the 8th pick. What did they move up from? It was they
didn't even move. They kept
up.
27, I think, right?
Yeah, they didn't even move up. It was a swap in 2030, I believe, and then the unprotected pick in 2031 to move up to 8 in the draft, which I think was way higher than any of us thought.
I was
and
wrong.
Minnesota has a lot more maybe good equity in 2031 than the Suns do. It's not that you were wrong. We were just guessing. It wasn't like a certified thing.
I don't have the analytics stuff that I'm one man.
And they get Rob Dillingham 8th. And are you familiar with what I'm familiar with is Kentucky guards being underutilized, and then how did they go 8th, and then how did Devin Booker fall to this?
He's like I don't know if he's a point guard, shooting guard. Oh, it doesn't matter because he's just really good at basketball. I think Dillingham kind of has the same as Maxey, where it's like. And to the point about people being like, oh, there's no point guard. Minnesota does not care about not having a point guard. Mike Conley's getting older. He's still great. Props to him. But I said, like, that team needs to, like, try to find an answer if he gets hurt or if he just starts, like, going downhill. They're apparently not worried about it. They're just like, we're going to get some more ball handlers, guys who can score, make the right basketball play. Terrence Shannon, again, like, where are these guys going to play with Conley, Edwards? If we're going to go small with wings, like, do you bump up McDaniels and play one of them alongside these guys? Nikhil Alexander-Walker, like, I don't know where the minutes are, but they got a lot of talent and they'll figure it out later. Like, I think they had a really good draft.
Britt Robson, who's covered the Timberwolves for a really long time, said that Connolly and his experience being around him when he has post-draft press conferences is very, we'll see, they're young, and he went out there and was like, Dillingham does this, and this, and we're going to do this with him, and he's going to be able to do this. They were very confident in his ability to play right away. Backup point guards, I'm going to talk about with them forever. Jordan McLaughlin, I don't know. Monte Morris was like, yeah, you did it. And then, nope, he didn't really.
Is he a free agent too?
He didn't really get in there. Both of them are free agents. Yeah, Monte's a guy worth mentioning, but I think I'm extremely confident one of those two guys is going to be a good rotation player. I feel like Shannon is going to be. I don't know on Dillingham, but I mentioned this in my write-up a couple weeks ago. Minnesota always finds a way to win on the margins. Naz Reid. The Conley trade, which was getting Mike Conley for pennies, Nikhil Alexander-Walker was just a throw-in, basically, in that trade, and they got him in there, and then Jaden McDaniels at the end of the first round. This regime has found a way, and that previous regime and this next regime, Conley's record in Minnesota, or Denver, speaks for itself.
Who's the guy? Who'd they draft last year? Jalen Clark, and who am I thinking? Oh,
Wendell Moore, they traded today. Josh Minott, I think is how you say it, is the other one.
But I was also, they have, I'm reading this correctly? They got Klintman too?
Did they get Klintman?
And they have Leonard Miller from last year, which he's a big project, but like to your point about that front office knows what they're doing. They are loading up on
was traded to Detroit.
Why is he on their roster? I'm literally on their roster. Okay, well, it's not official yet. My bad. But yeah, anyway, Leonard Miller is who I was thinking about. He was a really high profile guy out of high school. I think he went G League Ignite or Overtime Elite, one of those. And
that was draft heads were really excited about that pick when it happened.
He might be a mess, but they're giving him time, so in theory. But anyway, yeah, their front office knows what they're doing.
Jeremy relaying that a few people were asking about Nas Little in the live chat. We addressed it a little earlier, but again, I'm not trying to give you homework, but I wrote about it on ArizonaSports.com a couple weeks ago. There is a legitimate chance that he comes in and is just a wing next year. He has to stay healthy. When he was healthy for 2.5 weeks, he was healthy at the start of the season, and you and I came on here at the end of every week and was like, Nas got a little minute here, a little minute there, a little shift there, and every time he's done well. He's played well, and then he got in the rotation for 10 games, played well, and then he got hurt.
Yeah.
And then he was
always hurt.
On and off the injury report. So it's not like when he was healthy, he was an absolute no-brainer, steal, awesome part of that trade. It's just that he was potentially capable going forward, and if you would have given him the full season to get healthy, or not get healthy, get comfortable. So he's worth discussing. We're going to talk about him a ton this summer if he's still on the roster. As far as trading him, the salary is so small that you're not really finding the guy that you would want. You would hope that there was a backup something, like a backup point guard with that, but we just ran through the salary numbers. Javon Carter and Davion Mitchell are only the two real matches. None of those guys fit the need that you want. Before we go, we only have a couple of minutes left. Speaking of things I wrote an off-season preview a couple days ago looking at every team in the West, and it was a big question for each team. A couple of those happened already. KCP declines his player option, which if you and I are understanding CBA bird rights things correctly, I don't think Denver has a chance anymore of re-signing him on a big, huge deal. They would have had to have him accept the player option and then re-sign him to a contract extension. So I believe KCP has moved on, and that is a big move because they've lost him and Bruce Brown back-to-back years, and they've only replaced them with rookies. Oh, by the way, Reggie Jackson, who was quietly having moments of stability for them last year, they traded him away and unloaded his salary by getting rid of 3 second-round picks. Jalen Pickett, Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, all these guys, Julian Strawther, all of them might have to play next year because they're in a similar situation cap-wise as well. Keeping on who they can sign in free agency, but I think that's a huge loss for them, and I think I'll see what their roster looks like, but I feel comfortable putting them maybe a tier down from the top teams. I really feel like it's that big of a loss. Is there any other teams you're looking at?
I think we're going to see something crazy. I think until Sunday and Monday hit, I think that's when Chris Paul's thing in Golden State, they may need to make a decision on his contract being guaranteed. That's where it's very tradable with picks being involved in complicated things. But if they get a star and keep going, I would be surprised if they can find that, but I am not putting that out of there. It's possible. And then I guess Pals with Ingram and all that mess, and then Clippers, Paul George's offseason is going to basically be the starting point for this offseason and when it gets crazy and how the big moves happen and the domino effect, kind of like the Lillard thing was. And that might, that's a kind of different thing because Damian was under contracts, but
can't remember how much we talked about the Mikal trade last podcast, if at all. Mikal gets traded. We talked about it in effect with the Durant report. Keep an eye on who Brooklyn trades. Dorian Finney-Smith, but most importantly, Cam Johnson. OKC would love to get Cam Johnson if they could get him. It just depends on if they want to go into the war chest of first-round picks. I think it's 12 tradable first they have. It might have gone down after today. But they could get Cam Johnson if they want him. And it's just up to them if they want to trade for him. Keep an eye on the Dallas Mavericks in that regard as well. They have, I believe, 3 tradable first-round picks, or 2, excuse me. The Lakers are the team with 3. They're going to go star hunting. They're going to ask around in Cleveland about Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland. They're going to probably go to Atlanta as well and see if they can get Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. New Orleans, Brandon Ingram's on an expiring contract. Are they done with that? Are they done with CJ? What are they going to mix around with? Sacramento has Keegan Murray. Didn't have the breakout year I predicted last year, but maybe it's coming next year. De'Aaron Fox is awesome. Sabonis, awesome. Can you move Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter? I've been workshopping the Kyle Kuzma trade. We'll see there. Golden State, is there a Chris Paul non-guaranteed trade thing? Is there one last big move left? It seems like they're cooked. I don't know. We'll see. Houston apparently is looking to move all these picks right now. To your point on fireworks, I just named 5 teams where they could potentially do stuff and are looking to do stuff.
I was going to make sure we hit on Houston. Kellen, do you think they'll trade for Kevin Durant?
No. I do think that Houston getting Reed Shepherd at 3 and San Antonio getting Stephon Castle at 4 are 2 guys that certain smart draft people love. And if Reed Shepherd is by far the best player in this class, or if Stephon Castle is by far the best player in this class, all of a sudden Houston is in the hunt for a top 6 spot. And yes, that would mean the Spurs are in the hunt for a top 6 spot as well. I think Wemby's that good. There's a lot of stuff going on. Memphis, what are they doing? They got their center, Zach Edey, kind of weird, but are they doing anything else?
Weird, but...
We'll wait and see. Don't doom scroll tonight, everyone. Just go watch the Bear like I'm going to. Goodbye.